So, I wanted to get this video out as quickly as possible, since I have other projects I'm currently working on. So, I apologize for the quality of the audio of the editing. My overall goal was just to get my points across. Before I start this video, I feel that people may get bothered about using and citing post in this video, despite that she mentioned she does not want it to be used in any videos. My response to this is that she posted her feelings and interactions with James on Tumblr, a public platform that anyone can access. By doing this, she has allowed her words to be seen by everybody. Saying that it is okay to share the link with anyone, but they can't post it in a video doesn't make sense. If she wanted privacy, she would have either said nothing or written it down in a private medium. By not doing so and telling other people to spread the word, she lost all rights to complain about this public information to be put in a video. Besides, you advise people to continue and share and link the original posts. When it comes to the internet, you don't make anything you upload private. You either allow it to be shared completely, or you don't share it at all. Also, I want to add this video is not monetized. I don't intend to make any money off of this. This video is made solely for the sake of criticism. Which, with that out of the way, let's get started. Okay, so recently, a decent-sized YouTuber by the name of DaftPina's, someone known for his videos on artists and specifically animation YouTubers, released a video about the Odd1sOut, calling him a hypocrite and even made him out to be racist. Like with all celebrities that try to paint themselves in a good image, people want to believe that such a personality is too good to be true, and DaftPina's really tried to paint that picture. Now, if you know anything about DaftPina's, you would know that at the beginning of his career, his videos were fairly rude just for the sake of getting clout. However, he has long since apologized for his actions against those who he has previously been rude against, and also has improved his content considerably, offering much better criticism and being more entertaining. So when I saw that he was making a video on the Odd1sOut, I was excited to see what he had to say. As such, I watched the video 3 times over the span of one day, and I must say, each time was just as disappointing as the last. Hi guys, I'm the Bandit of the East, and today we'll be talking about DaftPina's, one step forward, one step back. Let's begin. Everything regarding James and his ex-high school friend was spoken about by an artist known as TMNT. This is important later. So, to give you a TLDR, played a big role in James's early years of being a comic artist. During this time, James did some honestly racist and straight up thoughtless and mean actions towards her. And this, combined with their differing views on racism, ultimately caused their friendship to end, leaving her scarred by their interactions. Now, I need to point out that Google was able to provide evidence of some of these interactions, so they're not baseless by any means. However, after that, TMNT goes into a Facebook conversation between James and one which I'd like to emphasize happened 6 years ago. This is where my problems with the video rose, as TMNT treats this conversation like it happened yesterday.
It's perfect! It's diabolical! It probably doesn't represent his feelings today, but who cares? He's done for!
The conversation is meant to bring up some issues with James's opinions on racism and how he defines it. Now, I'll admit that James made some ignorant comments which shows a definite misunderstanding of racism. One of them being that he didn't think Song of the South was racist, which it totally was, and it also severely downplayed the treatment of the slaves and made it look like they were happy, which they weren't. However, again, I want to emphasize the past tense here. As I said, these are things he said in a Facebook conversation back in 2014. I didn't realize this was Twitter, and we're trying to dig up every grain of dirt that we find. While his views in this time were obviously ignorant, there's no substantial evidence that he still has these views, and I will get to that. But hold up, what if we do treat the conversation as if it was recent? Well, how about we take a look at... While TMNT was happy to point out James's poor analogy of Jar Jar Binks, she does nothing to point out comment that if a person of color thinks something is racist, a white person can't tell them that it isn't. Are we going to just act like there's nothing wrong with that comment? First of all, that has got to be one of the most entitled things that I have ever heard. Racism is not defined by a minority's opinion. Your race doesn't give you a free pass to nullify everything that a white person says on racism. Saying that people of color dictate what is racist in itself, as it says that your race dictates your ability to make a fair point. The fact that Daft and Similarly Do choose to blatantly disregard this, but focus on James's flawed thoughts on racism, was what caused me to question the integrity of this video. But enough on that. I'm sure that the common consensus was that James needs to apologize for his actions. However, James actually did apologize in June of 2019, although it was close to 5 years after the falling out with his high school friend. In this apology, James acknowledged that he was insensitive and ignorant, which matches how described him when it came to race, and goes on to say that he wanted to try to make things better if she's willing. Now, this apology then gets written off as insincere by both Similarly Do and
He continues on with a non-apology. Rightly so, she doesn't accept it, stating that he is older than her and that hiding behind his age does nothing when he is 19 saying those things.
However, we're not going to talk about that. Whether or not this apology was or wasn't sincere is not really something I feel like I can properly speculate. Instead, I want to mention the response. People never seemed to respond to James's apology, as there's no image to show that she did so. Rather, she made a public post saying why it was a bad apology, and wrote it off. If she wanted an apology so badly, why didn't she reply to him directly, going into more detail about what she was mad about? Whether or not the apology was sincere isn't the problem here, as Dangle could have tried to settle things with James in a private message, but she didn't. Instead, she says she wants an apology for not getting any credit for helping James in his early days, and for their mutual friends who also suffered from James's past actions. Okay, both of these are fair points, and should be acknowledged. She also stated how she wanted an apology for being portrayed as an angry black friend. However, I believe there may be a reason James did this. In the video Interpersonal Relations, James himself said he was an annoying friend, so it is possible he was trying to make her look annoyed with him, as that matched with what he was saying. And to be honest, it would make sense to have you look annoyed considering the way he acted. But, nonetheless, she was still portrayed in a negative way. In that case, she has a right to be mad, no matter what James's reasons were. So, James deleted the video from his channel. This is where things get annoying. Daft uses this as an excuse to accuse James of sweeping this under the rug so no one would find out. However, the video Interhuman Relationship is still easy to find on YouTube. If he really wanted to hide it, he could have copyright striked the channels that were uploading the video. But he didn't. He probably deleted the video because he no longer wanted to get ad revenue off of a video that hurt somebody's feelings. While saying James is sweeping dust under the rug makes for an attention-grabbing story, it doesn't hold much weight. Some may argue, why didn't he apologize? Well, he did. But Dangle didn't accept the apology, and showed no evidence of talking to him since. And she previously stated that she went through great lengths to block everything involving him on her computer. So any chances she had of talking things out with James were gone, ultimately slamming, locking, and boarding up the door James left open to her. Then Dangle goes on to say this: I want an apology for how you never draw brown characters. He has nothing to apologize for. If you look at his videos, Strangers Trying to Sell You Stuff, Subway 3, My Poetry Teacher, Getting Recognized, 2, My Teachers, and probably a bunch of other videos that were made at least a year before your post on James's apology message, you'd see he does put brown people in his videos, which means the statement wasn't even true the day you said it. However, how do you even know what he made when you went out of your way to block everything on your computer that had his name on it? From what you say, you never actually watched anything he made, yet you want to say he never drew brown characters? The statement is false, and makes James look worse than he is. While Dangle's past experiences are bad and should not be ignored, she proves herself to also be racially biased by her comment in the Facebook conversation, and prejudiced by the fact that she let one white person form her opinion on all white men. both of which simply do accuses of James. I also want to reiterate that didn't want Daft to speak about this because he was white. Also, she made a claim about James's content she really had no right making. So, the person Daft cites for James's racial problems is racially biased, and the person cited as an example of James's moral character says things that aren't true. The fact that Daft didn't bring up these aspects is a little troubling, as looking to the credibility of your sources is a crucial part of any research. Going forward, this continues, with Simply Do mentioning how James portrays races in his videos. First, she mentioned how he refers to Native Americans as Indians, despite having made a video making fun of Columbus for calling them Indians.
Starting with Boy They Were Wrong, where he makes fun of Columbus for calling Native Americans Indians. In subsequent videos, he keeps calling them Indians, as recent as the 2020 video, Getting Lost at Camp Geronimo.
This would be a valid criticism, except some Native American tribes call themselves Indians, and don't like the phrase Native American, since it's a term that is far too broad to describe them.
Reservations, the word Indian is still used without hesitation or negative connotation, used as identity, not universally, but near. Now, as for Native American, while preferred by some, there exists in others a strong dislike and resentment of the name.
CGP Grey actually made a very informative video about this, which I would highly recommend watching if you haven't. But the point is, referring to Native Americans as Indians isn't the problem with race that Simply Do makes it out to be, and once again, Daft did nothing to point this out. Now, as a side note, you should totally ask any Native American you meet how they want to be called, just to make sure. Anyways, she then mentions in his video, My Thoughts About Job Interviews, how in the scene where James is tutoring math, all the kids he's tutoring look Asian, with slanted eyes and bowl cuts.
Cool.
Asians are also people James likes to point out. In videos like My Thoughts on Job Interviews, where the math kids he was tutoring were all Asians with nearly the same haircut and slanted eyes. Noting the race of the kids didn't play a part in the story, it's kind of weird that he went out of his way to make them a stereotype.
Does this show several stereotypes of Asians? Well, yes it does. So let's talk about it. Now, this seems a little off topic, but I chose to go in depth into this argument, and I hope you pay attention to everything I say. As for the way he drew them, with bowl cuts and slanted eyes, there's a possible explanation. While this could be considered stereotypical, it's possible that James was basing his drawings off of Asians from popular cartoons he probably watched as a kid. For example, in Kids Next Door, number 3 is frequently drawn with slanted eyes, and has a similar haircut. If he was using number 3 as a reference, this style of drawing Asian kids in the video makes more sense, and also makes it seem like it's not so much about stereotypes. Now, you may be asking, but Bandit? What about Jake Long and Juniper Lee? They are also popular Asian cartoon characters that were around during James's childhood. Why not use those? Well, the character designs of Kids Next Door matches James's style far more than that of Juniper Lee or American Dragon Jake Long. It would make sense to go with the design that matched his style more. So while you can scream racism at him, it is also possible he based his drawings off of cartoons that James, as well as the rest of us, saw as a kid and still see today. Now, I cannot say that for sure, but I feel like listing another possibility instead of just jumping to the conclusion that he is racist, as immediately calling somebody racist or something like this seems a little unfair. Now, in referring to the Asians being good at math stereotype, I have something else to say. Now, in another video featuring a TED Talk by Canwen, I hope I pronounced that right, description listed below, she mentioned that these stereotypes, including the one about being good at or loving math, caused her to change the way she acted in public, trying to do her best to take any action that would make it look like she fit none of the stereotypes at all while she was in school.
But as amusing as these interactions were, oftentimes they made me want to reject my own culture because I thought it helped me conform.
Even though James never made comments regarding any of the really negative stereotypes about Asians, the fact is that this is a video made for kids. This makes it problematic in the sense that it can give the impression to kids that saying stereotypes like this is okay, when in reality they can have negative consequences. Now, despite this does not make James racist. In his content since then, I have not seen him make any more jokes about stereotypes in a similar manner. It looks like these instances were bad takes that haven't been repeated in its 3 years since Academy Anecdotes was uploaded. He seems to have learned from it and moved on. However, I will say he should at least make an edit to those videos in question, or even say something in their description in case any impressionable kids watch them in the future. Moving on, Simile Adu goes on to talk about how James makes the race of people the punchline in Academy Anecdotes. Which, no, he doesn't. The punchline was based off of subverting expectations, by giving us the impression he wasn't going to mention the race of someone, then doing it anyways.
His race doesn't matter, so I'm not gonna say it. Asian.
People weren't going, "Ha, Asian, so funny!" But, hey, I was told that he wouldn't do that, but he did. Also, Domix has made a similar joke about black people in 2019, Childhood Memories, which is far more recent than Academy Anecdotes.
The teams, and mine had some bloody good players who were black.
I don't see him getting called racist or racially insensitive. It's because it's not a racial joke. It's a joke on subverting expectations. Now, if you mention how in the video Academy Anecdotes, he gave Asian kids shirts that were made to look like the Supreme brand shirt, since popular Asian YouTuber RiceGum constantly wore those shirts, you might have a point. Because, let's be honest, associating anyone with RiceGum is insulting. Next, the complaint that he voiced a black guy. Why didn't he get a black guy to voice him?
While watching this, I thought, hey, why didn't James get someone else to voice the part? The answer is, stop asking stupid questions and look how funny James...
I don't know. Maybe because it was easier just to do it himself, like how he voiced his mom, sister, every teacher, customers, or just anybody that wasn't him, and didn't have to wait for someone else's lines? Did he have to wait till he voiced a black guy to see the pattern? Really? Convenience is a thing, you know. Or maybe he wanted to do it to see how well he could pull it off. He was given the opportunity in the past, after all. Maybe he was wondering if he could do it? I didn't know experimenting with voices when you make videos is such a bad thing. If he wants to voice a black guy in his video, who's to say he can't? Now, one argument I saw was, but he gave him an accent. Maybe the person James actually ran into was black and had an accent? He's voiced other black characters without the accent, so it would not be fair to assume he'd use the accent just because the character was black.
The third guy, and he asked, "What time do you guys close?" 15 minutes ago. Ladies and gentlemen, here we go. Are you James? Who?
While I am on this, let's talk about the time when James took a job to voice a black character after advised against it. Now, if you want to say that James was a bad friend for ignoring his friends' feelings, then you can make that argument. However, you can't say it was bad for James to take the gig in general. James still had every right to take the job, as he was offered it. Also, since he himself said that he wanted to be a cartoonist, he likely saw this as a rare opportunity, especially for someone his age, to further his career in a direction he was truly passionate about.
Teacher when I grew up. My dream job was actually a cartoonist.
Saying that he should give up this opportunity because he's not black is a crappy thing to do as well. Remember, this is called voice acting, which means it comes down to how convincing someone's voice and acting sounds, not the color of their skin. The idea that the color of your skin needs to match the character a voice actor plays is racist in itself. If a person in charge of casting voices for characters believes that a particular voice actor's ability makes them perfect for the job for voicing a specific character, why shouldn't that voice actor get hired? Are they supposed to say, "Sorry, you can produce exactly what I envisioned for the character, but your skin color doesn't match the character, so you can't get the job"? You're telling me that's okay? You don't choose someone for a job based on race, you do it based on ability. Also, I'm going to bring up an article on Cree Summer on this, link in the description. In this article, it is stated that one reason she loves voice acting is because she is free to be anything she wants, a black girl, a white girl, even an inanimate object. So one aspect of voice acting is that you can voice whoever you want, and saying that someone is marginalizing black people for taking a job that they were offered, that the person running the gig thought the voice actor would be good for, seems a little unfair. If they are good at the job, and they want to further the career they are passionate about, why shouldn't they take it? So, let's go over everything Simile Adu said. Was James insensitive in the past? Yeah, he was. Should he apologize for it? Well, he actually did to some extent. So, I don't know, maybe you can argue he should make another apology, but Bill hasn't really shown to be receptive to him. Should he give some credit? Totally. If everything she said was true about helping him, she deserves a shout out at least. But is really a great person to be talking about racial problems in James? Considering what we mentioned previously, I'd say no. Do his videos show that James hasn't changed at all? Again, no. It's actually the opposite. He is not harassing people, he's not pushing to do things they don't want to do, and he's not still making stereotypical jokes about races. He hasn't in years. Should he point out that some of the jokes he made in the videos in the past are not okay? Yeah, he should. But would it kill you to acknowledge that he doesn't do this anymore? It's not exactly an apology, but it doesn't mean he hasn't improved. Now, let's go into the portion of the video where Daft starts to criticize James himself. Now, I actually had a couple pages of stuff on this, but recently James responded to Daft, saying a lot of the same points I was planning to bring up. So, for this portion, I'll add a couple of other supporting points. Once Daft starts taking over, he goes into speculation about bad blood between Adam, aka Something Else YT, and James, based on some very loose evidence. First off, Daft mentions how in James's video, Starting Conversations, made in 2017, Adam said a line in the video, but James didn't credit him in the description.
Video stars Adam with Something Else YT with a voice as clear as day.
I thought we'd be in there for hours!
I hope I never see you again.
Same, and that's why I'm never going in an elevator again.
But no credit.
We don't know why this was, but this was not a repeated offense, as on several occasions in 2018, James featured Adam in a couple videos and gave him credit. Of course, Daft does not mention this. He also didn't make any indication that he asked Adam about it, which is surprising considering a lot of his recent videos included words from people that were either the person he was critiquing or someone who worked with them. Doing so would have allowed for a possible explanation about this one instance. Next, he then goes to speculate that Adam and James grew apart based on a couple tweets.
Noting, of course, that James hasn't tweeted or talked to Adam publicly since January, remembering that he replies to all of his other friends, so you might have to wonder if they drifted apart or something happened. Adam?
To support this, he mentions that Cafe Chaos was not supported by Adam.
Also noting that in James's upcoming game, Cafe Chaos, Adam seemingly didn't promote it, and it'd be hard for James to cut him out like he was in a video.
So this whole aspect of the video is just speculation made by a person who, instead of talking to people, looked at some tweets instead and called it a day. I'll let James take the wheel here, as in a comment he destroyed Daft's only point about this speculation by stating that Adam did in fact promote the game Cafe Chaos, just on his YouTube community page. Also, just as a side note, it's not as if there is more going on with these people outside of their internet though, right? It's not like the thought of these two talking to each other outside of the internet is a possibility. I also want to mention that Jaden Animations, someone who still frequently works with the Odd1sOut, didn't seem to promote Cafe Chaos on Twitter either. This makes Daft's point seem a little less stable, but he doesn't mention this. Instead, he mentions the video where James says he has a girlfriend, but makes it sound like the reason James never said his girlfriend's name was because James didn't want to have to delete the video if they broke up.
I bring this up as if they broke up. Would he delete the video? Is that why she isn't named?
James also debunks this with the very obvious argument that he didn't want his girlfriend getting doxxed or having people show up to her house like he had to deal with. You know, since James is a celebrity with millions of fans? This explanation was honestly far too obvious for Daft to not come up with. He's not stupid enough for this thought to have never occurred to him. And while this may be speculation, I want to say he knew this was probably the reason James did not reveal his girlfriend's name. But he wanted to find a way to make James look bad. Now, let's talk about James's multiple animator project. Yeah, it definitely lost millions of potential views and got less exposure for the animators who worked on it, but then Daft insinuates that James got rid of it because he just unfriended one of the animators.
What have happened is that James unfriended one of the animators, so I guess everyone else had to suffer.
Which, again, he has no evidence for. Also, again, why didn't you contact the artists who worked on this project for their perspectives on the subject? You have in the past talked with both Pants' Pajamas and a Chiflake, both of which had their work in the map animation. Yet, you show no effort to speak with them or any of the other animators in this instance where you speculate James of being unfair. You even contacted Pants' Pajamas before when talking about the Odd1sOut in the past. So why didn't you do that in this case? It's like you avoided any opportunities for what you said to get contradicted.
We don't want thoughts of people perpetuating something that just isn't true. We don't want people spreading around something that isn't true. That part is genuinely a little heartbreaking, at least for me.
Now, James also mentions that he removed the video because of the title MAP. While this title could have been changed, did we stop to consider that he probably brought this up with all the animators that worked on this video, especially since they all still work with him sometimes? And that when he brought up the lead in the video, they were all okay with his decision? Another thing that could have been solved if he reached out to the people that he has shown to have talked with before.
He participated in the Streamy Awards of 2019 after sending a form that cost him money.
Now let's mention the Streamies Awards. Here, James mentions that he was invited to the Streamies, which makes the aspect of paying to enter, which DaftPina's was very happy to point out, null and void. Also, like Jaden, James showed a distaste for how the Streamies was run, but Daft actually didn't show this either. I want to make another point on top of what James himself had said. Do you think that maybe there's a possibility he's trying to make more of a name for himself? Just because he thinks all animators should be treated as equal, doesn't mean he shouldn't try to improve his standing on YouTube in ways that can be beneficial. James is running a business at this point and working on improving his brand. When it comes to business, you need to have a good reputation and a name that will sell in order to get other companies to consider you profitable and work with you. Having an award given by a big company like YouTube is similar to getting a seal of approval, and can possibly open more doors for more business opportunities. Just because he is aiming for an award does not mean he's saying he's better than other animators. It's more likely he's trying to say to other companies, hey, work with me, I'm profitable. Now, as for the mobile game, James basically explained there's lots of things going on in the background that we don't know about, as well as a lot of things he has no control over when it came to this game. To be honest, that is understandable. I'm not going to pretend I know what it's like to develop an app or mobile game, or work on any kind of project for that matter. It's been seen that in the past when it came to his books, he didn't entirely have control about how things were made either.
So, the title of his book wasn't at all what he actually wanted it to be. That was a change that I think they suggested, and all that other stuff. So these are still complaints that he definitely has that linger in the back of his mind. I don't think there's a resentment towards the work. He knows that things could have been a lot better, but he learned. And while, yes, even with learning, there is certain things that are still out of control, James still did the best that he could.
But let's think of it from his perspective. At the time, he was a 22-year-old with a quite sizable fan base whom got approached by investors and publishers, and he probably didn't know how to vet out quality partners. And being new to the entertainment industry, he is bound to make some mistakes when putting his brand on merchandise.
James said he was trying to make some changes in the app, so we can look for that in the future. Finally, we have James' response to Daft. Okay, so I'd say you have a point here when it comes to James not forgiving you. If you didn't go out of your way to create all these false speculations about James throughout this video, and ignore all the flaws and possible shortcomings in your arguments, Throughout this video, you have only proven that James has every right to choose not to work with you. Even if you never made this video on him, and even though you apologized to all of his friends and they forgave you, he is still under no obligation to forgive you himself. The sad thing about this is that you were really proving him wrong for a while with a lot of the videos you were making. They were honestly of good quality and you had a lot of good points in them. But this video is comparable to your old ones in the sense that it's not so much about criticism, but more about making someone look bad just to get views. While you may have had some points that you could stand on, the majority of your arguments are like a glass vase, transparent, hollow, and fragile. You really took one step forward and then just one step back.
Close, there's something wrong, and it's not just with the arguments. This is an interloper trying to suck some blood out of these YouTubers manufacturing the controversy, crafting mountains from molehills. Pointing out that James is probably not this super whimsical marshmallow man 24/7 is not this master own, it's not a conspiracy theory. He's sitting over here like, what inner darkness does that duplicitous smile hide? He's probably just a dude.